Greetings, Internet. I'm John Bailey, the Popcorn Junkie, and here's what I saw this week. Format a bit this time. Given how new releases don't have a lot of footage to show beyond trailers and clips and YouTube's back-asswards way of dealing with copyright, I've decided to do more of a vlog-style review instead of the traditional review format of talking over clips from the thing. At any rate, let's get started.
Hold on to me for dear life.
So, this movie happened. For those who have managed to avoid the main discourse surrounding this, basically the backlash stemmed from the fact that the two stars have about a decade apart in terms of their age. Age gaps aren't a new thing in Hollywood, obviously, but given how long it's been going on, more and more people have become aware of it, especially the sort of inherent misogyny tied to it. The fact that the leading female has to be in her 20s, while the leading male could be anywhere up towards his 50s, and it's perfectly fine by Hollywood standards. Meanwhile, female actresses don't get the same sort of treatment. You don't see older women paired off with younger men in movies, unless it's trying to make a point or it's tied into the story, like something like Harold and Maude. This isn't to say that this is a new problem, or that it's anywhere specific to this movie and only this movie. It's just that we got a shiny new example of just how stupid this whole practice is, brought to us by Barry Levinson's Stupid, Stupid Kid. That whole discourse about the age difference and the inherent misogyny tied to it is better suited to its own video by somebody far more qualified to talk about it than I am. And in any case, it doesn't really matter to me in so much that it didn't affect my opinion of the film. Mainly because I already thought this movie sucked. Malcolm and Maria is basically an artsier version of Marriage Story. It's basically watching a toxic couple argue at each other for over an hour, and you're feeling uncomfortable the whole time and you want to leave, but one of them was your ride, so you're stuck there the whole time. Coincidentally, both lead males are also douchebag directors, so I'm beginning to sense a pattern with these kinds of movies. Real talk, as much as I love movies and I love digging into the whole filmmaking process, I could go the rest of my life without another movie dealing with some filmmaker's personal problems. They all basically kind of run together into the same movie for me, and I just can't care. It always reeks of some kind of self-congratulatory back-patting by the director saying, "Oh, look at me, I've turned the camera back onto myself. Now I am the subject of the camera. Aren't I so smart?" And yeah, that may have been interesting the first couple of times they did it, but after a certain point, it's just lazy. Of the infinite possibilities of stories you could tell, you decided to make it about you and your problems. Well, I'm sorry, Sam Levinson, son of prominent director Barry Levinson. I don't care about your problems. I mean, Christ, if I have to see another movie set in the Hollywood Hills about some douchebag artist and his struggle, I'm gonna go find these people myself and break their laptops over my knee. I mentioned in one of my 2020 recap videos that I don't like throwing around the word pretentious because it often gets overused in terms of criticizing specifically artsier indie movies. And while I hold that to be true, my God, was this movie pretentious. There really is just no better description for what I had to sit through than sheer and utter pretension. The dialogue is so overly written and elaborate and unnatural sounding, and I'm not one against swearing by any means. I do it a lot myself. But after the first half hour of John David Washington just saying fuck every other word, I was turning into a schoolmarm and I wanted the movie to watch its language. See, to me the word fuck is kind of like a seasoning. You sprinkle it here and there in the dialogue in order to elaborate on a certain emotion, and then once you do use it, then boom! Oh, you make the audience feel the reason for that word, you know? If you throw it in all the time, just dump the whole bottle of fuck into the mix, then you're just drowning out everything else around it. Like, the one good thing I will give this movie is the cast. Zendaya and John David Washington, you know, the age gap aside, are really good actors. And here they are doing their best. I mean, they're a bit over the top and silly at points, but I mean, yeah, this is basically a really crappy two-person play, and it's inherent on these two actors. And they're not bad. They're clearly not bad. It's just what they've been given to say is complete and utter garbage. Speaking of the script, man, Levinson thinks he is so ready to have the conversation of race in Hollywood. Now, I haven't seen Euphoria, you know, the show that put him on the map, and after this I kind of don't want to. But I think it's safe to say that Sam Levinson, of all people, is not the one to be leading the discussion on race in Hollywood through his films. That isn't to say that you have to be black to tell black stories. I mean, this is the discourse that happens every time something like this comes up. But at the same point, a black filmmaker could have told this story, but wasn't able to because Sam Levinson took their place. That's kind of the point. Like, yeah, you can have black characters, but you can't really tell black stories if you're a pasty white dude and the son of the guy who directed Rain Man. I mean, to think about how many black filmmakers, not to mention other non-white filmmakers, just try to break through and make a living in the industry and get noticed, and here comes the son of the guy who made Men of the Year waltzing through with the door held wide open, thinking he can tell black stories. It's like, this is not your lane, dude. Not every movie starring black actors needs to be about black issues, obviously. But to have the son of the director of Envy be the one to try and tackle these issues feels entirely disingenuous. The longer I had to sit through this movie, the more I could not stand it. It's so over the top in its delivery, but so up its own ass in the story and dialogue. In all honesty, like, I was done by the 40-minute mark. I wanted to be done watching this movie, and I still had like an hour left to go. Now you'd think, well, if you hated it so much, just stop it, but I kind of tie into C. Robert Cargill's sort of mantra where if you are sitting to watch a movie, and for him it was for when he was reviewing, but even in his own personal time, he talks about not wanting to leave a movie he paid for or just quit watching. He wants to sit there and watch the whole thing so he can form his opinion. I kind of agree with that. The idea that I can't really judge it wholly unless I've seen the whole thing. So to get through it, I had to stop and start it over and over again. Something I only did last year when I was watching The Night Clerk, which dealt specifically with misrepresenting autism. And the whole time I had to sit through each time starting over after taking a break. I just wanted to stop. Every inch of my body was screaming, stop. Just go watch something more enjoyable. Like an SPCA commercial. Or the scene where Littlefoot's mom dies. I'm just tired of shit like this.
Humans can get used to even something spectacular.
Hey, speaking of pretentious, I will admit I've never seen Another Earth. I managed to miss that one when it started making the rounds, nor did I really get the chance to watch his follow-up, I Origins. So this is kind of my introduction to Nick Cahill. And man, was this not a great introduction to the guy. What's sold to us as basically a romantic drama with elements of sci-fi thrown into the mix is just an outright slog to sit through. Like, Owen Wilson and Salma Hayek are both good actors. We've seen them be good actors, but none of that charm or charisma is seen anywhere in this movie. It's like it's been sucked right out of them. Every line of dialogue they have to say is garbage. It's like this was the first draft to the movie, but they decided not to do the subsequent drafts and just made that first draft into the shooting script. Not to mention the fact that for two really solid actors, they have no chemistry. There is no chemistry between these two, even while they're trying to push the romantic angle between them. And it just, you're never sold on it. It is so terribly written and executed. The rest of the cast isn't much better. I mean, I don't recognize anybody in this cast, really. And they don't really stand out other than it seems like they're trying to act human but are bad at it. It's like they're being told to act like they're an alien or an android and they have to pretend to be human and never quite get it. That's the performances we're getting. Now, for all I know, Cahill wanted that to be the direction. He wanted that feeling from the performances to make it feel disjointed and disconnected from reality. But if that was the intention, then he just made it look like he has no idea what he's doing. As for the sci-fi elements, it's not all that compelling. Like, there's hints at like a future sci-fi drug that gives you superpowers, I think, but it's never really established what the rules of this thing are. It's just, oh, these drugs have powers, I think, and then eventually gets to a point where there's a future utopia. But is it real or is it an illusion? What's real? What's not? Well, guess what? I don't care. You haven't given me a reason to care whether this is real or not. This again ties right back into the script. I think a couple more rounds, a couple more drafts, fine-tuning the rules and what exactly he is trying to say with this story, with these characters, with the sci-fi elements, you could get a fairly decent movie out of this. But it's like, no, I wrote the draft, it's done. Now we get to shoot. I think the biggest feeling I felt from watching this movie is, what is the point? Why am I watching this? What is there to gain from watching this movie? What is the story you are trying to tell? What are the themes you're trying to implement? What exactly are you trying to say, Mike Cahill? Because from what I watched, I couldn't find a reason. I couldn't find any reason for the movie to even exist. What I got from it mostly was the idea that this was some stoner's first idea, and he wrote down a few things while he was high, and then decided, I'll finish the rest later, and then just cobbled together something and said, yeah, this is done, on to shooting. Because that's the thing, the disparate ideas that it's trying to tackle here, drugs that give you superpowers, the idea that we're in a simulation, what's real and what's not, inequality, homelessness, addiction, all of these random ideas that never quite fit together. Doesn't that sound like your stoner friend trying to pitch you a movie while they're high? Because, man, that's what I felt like trying to comprehend this. There is no reason to watch this movie. Like, there are movies that are so bad that they're enjoyable, they're so incompetent that you have to laugh at them and you can mock them with others. But this is just a waste of your time. And while Malcolm and Marie pissed me off to no end, I would not want to sit through this again either, just because I can't get that time back that I watched this, whatever this is.
Can't wait to start!
One nice thing about the HBO Max G-Kids deal is that we have a pretty much direct line to the entire Studio Ghibli library, or most of the Studio Ghibli library. And even now we have a direct line to the newest Studio Ghibli release, Earwig and the Witch. I kind of want to recommend you just go watch one of the other Studio Ghibli movies, and you're good kind of skipping this one. The biggest change that people are going to notice is it's now 3D animated. People say computer animated, but most stuff, even the hand-drawn stuff, is done on computers now. So the big differentiation is hand-drawn for traditional 2D style, and then if you want to go further, you can try cell versus computer hand-drawn, but whatever. You've got 3D model rendered animations, kind of stuff that Pixar and DreamWorks all do. You've got stop motion and even puppeteering as a kind of animation. So this is a 3D rendered animated movie from Studio Ghibli, who is best known for more traditional hand-drawn animation. And yeah, people kind of noticed, because it's like it was like the first time Disney went to a full digitally 3D model-based animation instead of their traditional hand-drawn. It's something you're going to notice when they do it because it's a massive shift. Now, personally, I don't mind Ghibli trying out new things and moving into 3D animation. If they want to try it out and be as good at that as they were at hand-drawn, then by all means, go for it. In fact, you can even see some of Ghibli's traditional style in the character models. But it's like when you've spent your whole life drawing with your right hand, and then you decide to try drawing with your left. Especially if you're a right-handed person. They're so good at the hand-drawn stuff that by trying to do 3D, it's not as good. It's just overall not as good. This feels more in line with a TV sort of animation, present-day TV animation. Something made by like DreamWorks for Netflix or something like that. But if they could get to the point where they have the Pixar level of attention to detail, and then the Ghibli style of design and character work and all that, then by all means, I don't mind them doing 3D animation, especially if they can do a divergent sort of studio thing where one team does the 3D stuff, one team does the hand-drawn stuff, and then they pump out all kinds of interesting stuff between both. But it all depends on what they plan to do with it going on. But then the animation is only one of the problems. The main problem for me isn't the animation so much as it's Earwig, or Erica as she's called in the first 20 minutes or so. She is probably my least favorite Ghibli protagonist. Yeah, they have had kids that are kind of on the obnoxious side, they're kind of bratty. I'm thinking of the sister, Satsuki's sister from My Neighbor Totoro, I think Mei was her name. And Sen is a bit of a brat at points, but they're still endearing in one way or another. Ponyo is also one that's kind of bratty, but she becomes more and more endearing as we spend time with the character. Earwig is not that endearing. She is a brat through and through, and by the end of it, I felt like I was watching a villain origin story. She is so jaded and has this chip on her shoulder for being a slave when really there's not she's not mistreated the same way like a Cinderella character is. And that would be one thing if it was a Cinderella type story with an innocent character who is made to feel jaded, but she starts out a brat and she becomes a worse brat as the movie goes along. And I did not like her one bit. There's actually a point where the cat Thomas is helping Earwig out to make a potion. And even while Thomas is helping her, Earwig decides to treat Thomas like garbage and even at one point try to strangle him Homer Simpson style. It's just, she is such an unlikable character, and I hated that everything went her way because there was no reason for it to. Not to mention that, especially during the era of the Disney dubs, there was a lot of amazing Ghibli dubs to English. Here, between the 3D modeling making it harder to lip sync and the lackluster voice direction, this dub is kind of bad. I kind of want to go back and rewatch, see if there's the Japanese dub, to see if that's any better. But if it's the same story, the same issues would be there. Maybe it's just the voice acting is better. We've got a long-standing voice actress, Vanessa Marshall, as Bella Yaga. She's alright, kind of forgettable. You've got Richard E. Grant, who's a British character actor who plays the Mandrake, this sort of imposing, villainous kind of figure with a secret past and all that, and he's fine. Dan Stevens, who was the Beast in the live-action Beauty and the Beast remake and has been in a bunch of stuff. He's actually the best one here. Him playing Thomas he's very cat-like. He gets some sass in, but a lot of times he's just doing exposition dumps. But he gives a fairly solid performance, and I wouldn't mind him doing a Disney character or something, or doing more voice work in the future. I think he's solid at it. And then the other big name, and probably the biggest name, depending on who you are, is Casey Musgraves, the country singer, as Earwig's mom. And her singing is alright, but she's barely in the movie. For somebody of such prominence, it's basically like when South Park got George Clooney to do dog noises. It's just like a complete waste of a name. And even though like her singing stuff when they get to the music is good, she herself is barely in the movie, so why get a name at all? Back to the music, that really was my favorite part of this whole thing. You've got this, because the thing is, Earwig is named after her mom's band, because sure, and Earwig the band is a 60s psychedelic sort of rock. It's like acid rock, something like think Deep Purple's Hush, that kind of sound, or Inagata Vita by Iron Butterfly, that sort of organ-based rock guitar sort of sound, and it's killer. And I would have loved if the whole movie was like that, but it doesn't come until like halfway through the movie, and then by the time we get to the end, like, yeah, it's a killer soundtrack, but it honestly doesn't fit, because it just comes in halfway through, and then it doesn't fit the tone of the rest of the movie. So yeah, it's a killer soundtrack, it just doesn't fit this movie. This is also apparently based on a book by the author who wrote Howl's Moving Castle, so this isn't the first time they've adapted her work. I have no idea if this book's any good, so some of the issues I have may stem from the book, and some of it may have just been lost in translation between book and movie, or lost in adaptation, I might say. But at any rate, Earwig and the Witch is kind of like mid-tier Ghibli, and there are going to be fans who say, like, this is bottom tier, F tier Ghibli because of the 3D stuff, and I'm not into the whole debate between, hand-drawn and 3D modeling in terms of animation. I'm good with whatever. If you're a good animator in either medium, then you're good. And Ghibli needs work on their left hand if they're going to start drawing with it more.
So it's a 5-minute documentary of you all getting destroyed? I'd watch that.
I tend to focus on movies on this channel for the most part, and I did it on the podcast too. I didn't start talking about other things besides movies, things like miniseries or TV or something like that, until like halfway through my run. But I wanted things to end on a positive note this episode. So let's talk about Kid Cosmic. This is a series created by, massive figures in especially TV animation. Craig McCracken, Lauren Faust, and Francisco Angones. While Angones isn't as well known, he's been helping out with Craig McCracken and Lauren Faust going all the way back to things like the Powerpuff Girls. And the story here is, once again, another superhero sort of comedy series, this time dealing with more cosmic superpowers. The idea is kind of similar to the Infinity Stones, but very loosely. Like, it's cosmic stones that grant superpowers, but it's much simpler than how the Infinity Stones work. You've got a stone that grants flight, and they've revealed more about that stone as the series goes on, but I don't want to spoil it. There's a stone that makes you think with portals, and then there's a stone that allows for growth and invulnerability, turns you into just basically a kaiju. There's a stone that grants you multiplication power, so you can be multiple places at once and have these clones that are easily expendable. And then you've got a stone that grants precognition, so you can see into the future via immediate events or more long-standing events. And in true comic book nerd fashion, Kid, he's just named the Kid. I'm sure they'll explain more about that in another season, but Kid decides to glue the cosmic stones to individual hexagonal nuts to make rings. So he DIY'd cosmic rings to give him superpowers. But he wants to build a superhero team to fight, alien invasions and whatnot. He first gets the teenage daughter of the owner of the local diner, and she gets the power to think with portals. And she's kind of the level-headed one. She's kind of the straight character to bounce all of the humor off of. So she is a really well executed character. I really dig Flo. The tank with the growth ring is a 4-year-old toddler named Rosa, and she is adorable. She is the most adorable tank, and she is amazing, and I love her. I will say there are points where Rosa feels a bit overwritten. Like, it feels like they wrote her as a 7-year-old or so, and not as a toddler, but it comes and goes. But but really, Rosa is one of the best parts of this whole show. She is an adorable little tank who, instead of like clobbering time or getting angry like the Hulk, it's like, "Hey Rosa, it's playtime," and just she smashes everything. You've got Kid's grandpa, Papa G, who owns this junkyard as the one who multiplies. And he's a bit more of a comic relief, although, like with Kid, they develop their characters and their backstories and get more in depth into who they are as the series goes on. And I think it's really interesting, and they leave some interesting threads to follow for season 2. More on that in a bit. And then the final stone goes to a cat. So you've got a 10-year-old or so, something like that, pre-teenage, pre-adolescence kid. You've got a toddler, a teenager, an old man, and a cat. And they're going to stop alien invasions. So like I said, this is traditional sort of superhero comedy sort of stuff. And you've got Rob Renzetti, the creator of My Life as a Teenage Robot, as one of the major writing forces on the show as well. So you've got Craig McCracken, Lauren Faust, Rob Renzetti, just apparently Alex Hirsch from Gravity Falls wrote an episode. So, I mean, you've got some real massive talent from TV animation behind this show. And yeah, like, once again, it starts off very comedic, very like jokey, very meta commentary on superhero tropes and comic book stuff. Like, Kid is a comic book nerd. He loved comic books and superheroes, and so he's trying to emulate that, and then the series goes on talking about how all this, basically fulfilling certain tropes, but lampshading a lot of them, and it's really well executed. I think it's a great sort of parody in regards to like superhero stuff, superhero media in general. What they end up doing, there's a villain they face early on, played by Tom Kenny, the illustrious Tom Kenny, named Chuck. Named so because in the first episode, Flo, with her portal powers, got Chuck stuck in the floor of Kid's trailer where he hangs out. And so he's stuck Chuck. That's all he doesn't get an actual name. He's just Chuck from the rest of the series. But what they do with him and what they do with Tuna Sandwich, which is the name of the cat with precognition, is really interesting and kind of plays into the sort of wackiness of comic books and superheroes. And I really, really dug it. I loved how they ended up with this. And how everything sort of played into the next thing. And so you start going like, alien invasions, sort of silliness, and like the wackiness of this team makeup, slowly building into this more massive, serious storyline, but still not, not taking away the humor aspect of it either. So you've got the alien invasions coming in, you've got shady government operations going on, and then there's just one episode that's just a full-on tokusatsu Super Sentai parody, and I was here for it. I love crap like that. And the people who make this series clearly love superheroes and comic books and all that junk, and they know exactly what tropes to hit and which ones to lampshade and just where to have fun with it. This really is just one of the best kids series on Netflix and just in general right now. The other thing I wanted to mention was the art style for this. Like, the art style for this has this sort of Charles Schultz kind of style to it. It's got this interesting sort of crookedy line bit. I saw a bit of that in the Loud House, but the Loud House is a lot more cleaned up. This really feels sort of like, I'm not quite sure how to describe it. The closest I can, describe it is like sort of 60s era or early 70s era Charles Schultz. Or even like some of the modern Schultz. Little bits of that style to it, and it really works, especially with how creative they get with the aliens. There's a full-on alien species that keeps interacting with the heroes, and they have to keep fighting, that basically look like the monsters from Attack the Block. I don't know. I want to say it's a reference. That may not be a reference, but if it is a reference, which I think it's a reference, then it's a good reference. Because anytime we could bring that sort of neon, artificial glow against, like, just pitch black for creature design, anything like that we can bring into the mix, yes, please. I don't want to spoil too much just because I do want you to watch this. This is such a wonderful show, and I don't want to spoil any of it for you. Suffice to say that the cliffhanger for what would be season 2 leaves some very interesting threads to follow. They all tie into the final episode, but I'm very interested to see, like, they leave hints towards the end of the series about Papa G's backstory, and they start to elaborate more on the kid's backstory, and I'm very curious to see what they elaborate on in a second season, especially with what they hint at would be the overarching story of the second season. So I'm very hyped for this show, and I don't see nearly enough people talking about this. And given how Craig McCracken was dealt, the hand he was dealt thanks to Disney and their handling of Wander Over Yonder, I don't want Kid Cosmic to just get buried under the deluge of garbage that is the Netflix library. So please, I beg of you, not just so I can, get that second season, but because if you enjoy superheroes, if you enjoy cartoons, you should be watching Kid Cosmic, because it is that good. Like, yeah, it's Craig McCracken. It's not going to suck. Even if you don't love it, it's not going to suck. So, yes, do yourself a favor. Go watch Kid Cosmic. There's only 10 episodes right now. You can binge through them in a day. They're like you could binge through them in less than 5 hours and be good. So, yes, do yourself a favor and go watch Kid Cosmic. Since I did miss a week, I do want to kind of give a bit of a recap for what I missed. So in case you missed my Twitter, or in case you were interested in what I watched last week, here's a quick rundown of what I watched last week. The Bird was the best part of the whole thing. Pretty forgettable, basically like Our Friend. Just because it's based on a true story doesn't mean you made it a good movie. Wants to be 7 so hard, but just isn't good enough. Also, we need to be done with Jared Leto. Like, any day now, we can just be done with Jared Leto, and I think we'd be better off for it. It wants to be the Goonies, but it has none of the charm, and just because it features a Native Hawaiian cast and Native Hawaiian culture at the center, didn't really make me enjoy this anymore. It's just the worst kind of kids movie, and I could not stand it. Pretty charming movie. Justin Timberlake does all right as far as like a redneck goes. They kind of forgo his whole prison backstory to focus on the kid, who engages in a lot more feminine traits. He puts on makeup. He loves playing with dolls. His favorite shows is basically one of those pretty princesses, sort of Monster High style like shows to sell dolls to girls. So, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting sort of way to tackle the idea of challenging masculine stereotypes, but it's pretty forgettable overall. June Squibb is good, though, and so was Juno Temple. Honestly, my favorite movie of the year so far. Like, I was going to be a paleontologist. I was dead set on being a paleontologist as a kid, until I actually got out into the field and I got kind of intimidated by it. So seeing a dig site sort of unfold here is really sweet, and I love the story. Ralph Fiennes and Carey Mulligan are both fantastic. I kind of was not into Lily James's whole romantic subplot, but I'm also not into romance when it's not inherent to the plot either. So, The Dig is my favorite movie of the year so far. So this is the high watermark, and it's going to be the one to beat. Next time, we'll be covering Judas and the Black Messiah. It's about time Fred Hampton got his own biopic, as well as a bunch, just a ton of Netflix stuff coming out. And there's another To All the Boys I Loved Before sequel coming out. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I even missed one that came out I think I missed a couple. So there's a big Netflix dump coming out for next week. And then Willy's Wonderland, which is Nicolas Cage facing off against Five Nights at Freddy's and kicking the ass. I love crazy stuff like that, so that's going to be fun. Plus, depending on if it gets released at all, we may have to sit through and endure and talk about the disaster that is Sia's anti-autistic movie Music. Oh boy, do I have thoughts on that one. Until then, I'm John Bailey, and remember, skip the pretentious trash and just go watch Kid Cosmic. See you later, folks.